Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, Veronica Cartwright, Ian Holm, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton, crew of the Nostromo, cast in Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien.
There are certain films that live in the, certain films that live in the culture, and I think Ridley Scott's film is one of those. It's one of those stories that stays with us decade after decade after decade, and exciting and, in some cases, terrifying new generations. I think it's one of the greatest films ever made. I think it's one of the. I think it's a film of such a superb artistry that a lot of times I think a lot of people get things wrong about it. They call it innovative, and they call it. I take issue with the word innovative because I don't believe that it is. I think it's a basic story. I think it's a very basic boogeyman story, haunted house, 10 Little Indians type story. What makes it exceptional, what makes it great, is the passion and the love that Ridley Scott puts into creating this world, helping you get to know the characters in this story, picking a superb cast. There's not a weak moment in this entire film. But what really sets it apart is the fact that Ridley Scott grabs your attention in a way that few other films of this type are able to do. He's not rushed. He's not going to allow himself to push the narrative to the point of speeding up the story and thus losing the nuance. I've seen this movie a couple of dozen times, and there are still moments when I jump. And after so many viewings, knowing where the alien is, knowing what's going to happen, knowing that somebody is going to have a creature burst from their chest, and to still be shocked by it, to still be taken aback, is the true testament of a great filmmaker. And Ridley Scott is that, and this film is that. So let's get into it. Alien, we start off 2024 with a classic that has been rebooted a number of times, sequelized, if you will, prequelized, broken off into embarrassing side films. But I'm really excited because I love the first two films. First film being a masterpiece, the second film being one of the great war movies ever made, the third being a jumbled masterpiece mess. Just a fucking mess. A fourth one that I turned my back on, and I'm sort of eager to go back to see. And then two prequels that I thought one was problematic, one was great, and the great one elevated the problematic one. So there's a lot to talk about over the next month, and I'm really looking forward to get into it. So, Mr. Chavez, give us your relationship to this classic.
This is a classic. It's a fucking video store classic. And I love Blade Runner, right?
Yeah, of course.
I talk about that shit left and right. Like Blade Runner, this is one that I rented, that I would go to. But the thing is, like Blade Runner, for me, and this is interesting for me, is that this isn't one that Like The Exorcist would be one that I would watch with my friends over and over and over. Texas Chainsaw with my friends. Certain films with friends. Alien was that one I kept in my bag. I mean, we would watch it, whatever, too.
Yeah.
But to return to it, it was just me in the dark and that fucking TV VCR at night by myself. Me and Sigourney. That's my memory. And you're right. Like, I watched this last night, late as fuck, and there's a scene. She's already on the shuttle, and you just see the curve of the alien's head.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching it in the dark, and I'm like, man, like, they did such a good job of making the alien's head blend with the mechanics of the ship. It's like you can't even tell that, and fucking, and in my mind, I'm commenting on the fact that it's gonna fucking jump out at her.
Yeah. Oh, you know it's gonna jump.
Fucking got me.
Yeah.
Oh, you know it's gonna jump.
You know it's gonna jump.
And it jumped, and it still fucked with me, and I loved it.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I feel like it's there's something primordial about it. I think there's something that really digs into your psyche. It's the fear. One of the problems that I have, not with the film, but with our discussion of the film, is that you and I had talked a little bit about this off mic, but you can't go back to this film. It's almost impossible to watch this film for a first time. Everything is there. You know it's there. You know what's going to happen. You know that, for anybody who hasn't watched this film, I don't know, in 40 some odd film, this film is almost 50 years old, and there are no surprises anymore. If you haven't seen it at this point, turn this thing off, go watch it, and then come back. You owe it to yourself to do that. If you introduce it to your kids, do whatever the fuck you got to do, because this is one of the great movie watching experiences. The bigger the TV, the better. The darker the room, the better. The later at night, the better. It's hard to talk about this film without referencing the second film at least, but also talking about the surprises in the film. Ian Holm as Ash, the order of the killings, the way it plays out into the second and the third film to a degree, Ellen Ripley's character arc and how she goes from, like, it's very strange because, especially with the documentary The Beast Within that accompanies the Adrian Quadrology box set, the filmmakers talk about Sigourney Weaver as the star of this movie. And I don't think Sigourney Weaver is the star of this original film. I mean, I definitely believe she's the star of the second film, but I wouldn't call her a straight out main character or star of this film. This is an ensemble piece.
Yeah, it's an ensemble.
It's very much an ensemble. Girl. Yeah, she's the final girl. That's true. That much is true. But the real star of this film is Ridley Scott. He creates such a world. He creates such a strange and real world, and it's interesting to watch it in 2024 now. This first movie of the new year for me. It's the first movie I've watched in the new year. It's strange for me to watch this film and look at the technology that seems like the limitations of what they were capable of, but it looks far more futuristic and it looks far more realistic than something like Spielberg's Minority Report, where computer images are all holograms and you're moving things around in the air. You've seen
Hmm.
Minority Report, correct?
Yeah.
So you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking
In the
about.
theater, I thought.
This is old school IBM screens with the green lettering on a black screen. These are,
Yeah, looking like a digital clock. It's like
yeah.
very has that like. Yeah.
It's very interesting because it still seems real and natural. It seems like, and I like the idea behind these are not soldiers. These are not really intelligent, um, scientific minds. They call them truckers in space in the
Yeah.
beast within. They call them truckers in space, which I think is a fucking beautifully accurate description of Dallas, Lambert, Brett, Parker, Kane, and Ripley. I think it's unbelievable how class is a
Yeah.
major role in this
I
film.
want
I
to get
mean,
into that.
yeah, it's just
And
there's so many
I
different
want to hear you
angles.
on it
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. I'm sitting here
first.
watching it, going, there's a fucking
So obvious.
unionization. There's a strike getting ready to go
Yeah.
down in this movie. It's unbelievable.
Right.
Love it.
Well, before we get into the nitty gritty of it,
Hmm.
let's get into versions.
Yeah.
The question is, have you seen Alien? Yeah, I saw Alien.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what version did you watch?
Good point. Good
Because
point.
remember, this is a, I made a joke about fucking Blade Runner. It's like, because you were like, well, which version are you gonna watch? And it's like, well, I think I want to watch the director's cut. And you're like, well, the director's cut's not even his favorite. And
Yeah.
I'm like, which is his favorite? Oh, the theatrical. And I'm like, well, I don't fucking know heads or tails of anything about Ridley Scott at this point because Blade Runner fucking confuses me, and that's my favorite movie.
Yeah.
And there are about 5 versions of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All I say is keep the unicorn and take out the fucking voiceover. Aside from that, fucking not the unicorn, the white horse, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The origami. Which version did you see?
I watched them both. I watched the director's cut 2 nights ago, and I watched the theatrical cut this morning. And there are slight differences in shot lengths. Some of the pans are speeded up a little bit, I believe, or he's just trying to not the pan itself speeded up, but the length of the shot is shortened, I think. And there's only one. There's a moment where you see Dallas and Brett's final resting place. You find out exactly what happened to them, which I gotta admit, I kind of like the mystery of not knowing in the original. So you see Brett cocooned to a wall. No, you see Brett cocooned to a wall, and you see Dallas still alive, cocooned to a wall, begging for death, begging to kill him, which is something that would play out again in Cameron's film 7 or 8 years later. The other moment, which I liked, which I wish he had kept in, was after Dallas, Lambert, and Kane have returned to the ship, and Lambert, pissed as all hell, races over to Ripley and smacks the shit out of her. Out of anger, out of distrust, out of, it was an honest and real moment, and I loved the way it played. I thought it added a lot to that moment. Yeah, so it was very organic, very real, and very, and it was. I thought it was really well done. I missed that in the theatrical cut. Other than that, there's no point in watching the director's cut. The director's cut was it was almost like a hustle. It was all of these, when they were putting together the Blu-rays and the DVDs, especially because Cameron's version has like an extra half hour, maybe 45 minutes into it. I mean, you see the colony on LZ-25 or whatever it is. You hear more about Ripley's backstory. There's a little bit more going on the planet, but Cameron's version, except for I wasn't happy seeing the life on the colony before they discovered the Xenomorphs. Ripley's backstory really did help. In Alien, I would say, if you've never watched the director's cut, do yourself a favor and don't bother with it. It's not necessary. It's not important. And in some ways, I think it's better to preserve the memory of what you've seen rather than fuck it up with something later. It's like, I mean, when you watch Apocalypse Now, do you wish you had seen every version of it? I don't know. I still haven't seen Coppola's last. I don't think I've seen Coppola's latest version of the film, and I haven't seen Coppola's latest version of the third Godfather film. So I don't know.
I mean, that's one of those things that we get into. Is like, it's like it's the memory. Like, when I saw, because I watched the director's cut this time. I already remembered that scene where Dallas is begging for death.
Mm-hmm.
So I had already seen it from before.
But had you seen it in the context of the film, or had you seen it just as a YouTube thing, or
no.
deleted
I
clip?
I saw it. No, I saw it. Now here's the thing. I believe I'm pretty certain
your memory fucks with you. Yeah.
Right, but I'm pretty certain I didn't see it as a YouTube clip.
Okay.
I saw it within the context of a film. But did I see it as a fucking as a DVD extra or something like that? Did I see it as did I see this director's cut before because I rented it? That's what I think.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure I've seen the original theatrical release as a rented film also. And so it's like, when did the director's cut come out? All this and that. But the fact of the matter is that I remember the scene that we're talking about. And even think of the way that, like, just from your brain, from your memory in your brain to fucking, like, the way you articulate what you're talking about earlier, I'm thinking about that now. I'm like, oh, the unicorn in Blade Runner. Wait, the white horse. Wait, the unicorn. Or the origami unicorn. And you're, as the images are kind of like flashing, they're also foggy. Even if it's something that, like, you remember. In The Exorcist, in some fucking, in the director's cut or whatever, there are flashes of the face.
Yeah.
Okay, is the flash of the face on the cabinet or is it on the refrigerator? Tell me, Rick. You know what I mean? Like, do you fucking remember? But I know you saw it. It's probably on the refrigerator, but maybe not. The point is that for this film, you say there's not much of a difference.
No.
That's cool.
There's only about a 47-second difference in the two films. I think that's what I read online. 47 seconds.
And then go and look at this clip that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, before we get into the film, let's talk about the background of the film. What's the history of this production? We both saw the making of.
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's pretty interesting. It was like this. A lot of this comes out of John Carpenter. So Dan O'Bannon, who was a USC student, had worked with John Carpenter on a film called Dark Star, which was a somewhat comic science fiction take. I've never seen Dark Star. I don't know if you've ever seen Dark Star.
Haven't.
You haven't.
Not yet.
There's a part of me that wants to. There's a part of me that doesn't want to. You know, I love you. You know that I have a fondness for John Carpenter, and there's a part of me that just doesn't want to see something that's going to be mediocre at best. A lot of it doesn't seem like it might work as an artifact. It might work if we were talking about the trajectory of a career and how something develops. But you know, out of pure enjoyment, I don't know if it's something that I'd want to watch. You know, watching somebody's first film it's a risk-taking kind of thing. It's the reason that I've never watched Who's That Knocking at My Door. I don't know. I just don't know. But O'Bannon had this idea, and this is the part that I'd really like to know. O'Bannon and a guy named Ron Shusett wrote the original Alien film with this idea of a creature that comes on board a ship, and basically it's a 10 Little Indians kind of story, the Agatha Christie story of one gets killed and now there's 9, another gets killed and now there's 8, until you reach the last girl. So there's all kinds of argument between O'Bannon, and in truth O'Bannon seems somewhat a cunt, kind of difficult, but if he's arguing for his work, I mean, I don't know what to think, you know? David Giler seems a hell of a lot more constrained and in the pocket as far as being able to argue whatever he feels he brought to the project. But in the end, Dan O'Bannon gets full credit for this movie, for the screenplay of this movie, although it is said that David Giler and Walter Hill, the great Walter Hill, I must say, I think it's contractually obligated to call him the great Walter Hill. I think they probably made significant changes to the original screenplay, and I believe they were the ones who geared it more towards truckers in space, that kind of idea of blue collar workers, just, you know, they're garbage men, they're miners, that's all they are. They're going from one place to another, mining shit to bring it back, you know, to, I don't know, to power your cell phone or whatever the fuck it is 200 years into the future. So there's that relationship. It's really interesting if you watch The Beast Within, because you don't get a clear idea of whose film it is. You don't get a real clear idea of who wrote this thing, and because the Writers Guild is set up in such a way as to protect the original right. I think you have to write something like 51% in order to wrestle a screen credit. Like, for example, with Terry Gilliam's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Gilliam and Grissoni basically rewrote a script from an original novel from Hunter S. Thompson that was adapted by Alex Cox. Alex Cox is given screen credit. So it's like Alex Cox, his writing partner, Alex Cox and this guy, and then you have that and symbol. And then it's Terry Gilliam, Tony Grissoni. So, you know, basically, it's 2 different scripts, but whether or not the original script is even there might be some ideas there. So I'm really, the fact of the matter is that it's Dan O'Bannon's original idea. Ronald Shusett. Yeah,
you got to fight for that ampersand.
That you have to do. You do have to fight for that. And I think that was at a time before they would say Walter Hill and David Giler from an original story by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett, or whatever they do now. They've both complicated it and made it more streamlined, I guess. It depends on what it depends on how you benefit from that, I guess. So O'Bannon wrote this, and then somehow got discovered by the great Chilean-Argentinian filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky. And if you go back to our episode on Jodorowsky's Dune, which I'm not sure where it is in the archives, but it's probably not on iTunes, but it's definitely in the archives. Go to Libsyn.com and put in Dune or put in Jodorowsky, and it'll pop up. Jodorowsky had this fantastic idea of creating Dune, and he pulled
episode 352.
352. He pulled together all of these artists, Mobius, basically an artist, an ink and pen artist who would create, I think, Western imagery. Jodorowsky brought him in to create science fiction imagery. O'Bannon, who he wanted as a special effects consultant for some reason. Salvador Dali, as to give the project legitimacy, although I don't know how the fuck that plays into it.
Right.
Pink Floyd to do music. And there was
Mick Jagger was going to be in it.
Mick Jagger was. I mean, it's one of the great unmade,
David
unfilmable.
Carradine, right?
David Carradine. It's one of the great unmade, unfilmable. Because I still believe that Jodorowsky's film never could have been made. I would love to see that. I would love to see that book that Jodorowsky, basically
that everybody stole from.
Yeah, basically the 5 books in existence. Oh, and of course, Giger.
Well, yeah.
So they bring in all.
Which we were getting to.
H.R. Giger. H.R. Giger. The Danish.
Episode 350.
Yeah. Swiss.
Episode 354. I think I might have said 352, but it's 354.
354. So you can go back that and you can go into the archives of what, basically our archives, but also the archives of what would become Alien. So all of these, and I don't think, I wouldn't say that Ridley Scott had any part in stealing this team away from Jodorowsky. I don't know if anybody did steal it from Jodorowsky. I just think it was a coming together of minds, and it's just this brilliant moment that fit this other project. And
because of O'Bannon.
O'Bannon, because basically O'Bannon. So you have all this coming together. You have this incredible visual sensibility, and if you look at Ridley Scott's films, one thing. Ridley Scott is very much like Terry Gilliam in the sense that visually you're probably going to see something like you've never seen before. He's an incredible visual director. Starting out in commercials in the late 60s, 70s, he would, and I've never seen those commercials, but I'm sure given his eye, although he did didn't Ridley Scott do the Apple commercial? No. Did he do the Apple?
The 1984?
Yeah.
Microsoft, 1984, before 1984, whatever, something like that. And it's this Olympian, because remember, it's the LA 84 Olympics. And for all you fucking Angelinos out there.
Yeah. Remember it well.
At Memorial Coliseum. And so there's this 1984 hall, and to think of the Orwellian fucking assembly, right? And in the center of this, up the center aisle, runs this Olympian, and they throw a hammer,
like a sledgehammer, not a hammer, a sledgehammer, right? Wasn't it?
Like a sledgehammer, like Thor's hammer type of thing. And this is this big fucking Microsoft, Apple, not Microsoft, Apple commercial, classic commercial, and that's fucking Ridley Scott.
Yeah. The point of it being, this is an incredible visualist. This is a guy. If you look at Blade Runner, if you look at and you look at the subsequent films that have come after. You got to remember, part of the reason that Alien got made was because, number one, 20th Century Fox and the incredible success of Star Wars just 3 years earlier, and the preparation for Empire Strikes Back that was coming out in probably 80, 81, somewhere around there. I think it was 76, 77, 80, 81, and 83, the original trilogy. But Hollywood is opportunistic at best and at worst. And in some ways it works out well. In this case, I can't help but say that this is one of the moments where it was just beautifully handled, as opposed to Carpenter's film 4 years later that was just fucking lost. So you have this space opera that is Star Wars, A New Hope, Star Wars back then. But you have this space opera that is telling this fairy tale that is a very basic story, of good versus evil, the hero's journey, the growth of that character arc, and you couple it with now Alien, which is a much darker film, a very pessimistic and negative, I guess, handling of the genre. Something that is more akin to Joseph W. Campbell's Who Goes There, which was made into Howard Hawks's 1930s film, or 1940s. Was it 40s or 50s? The Thing from Another Planet, basically.
I think it's 50s.
Yeah, 1950s Thing from Another Planet. There might have been some communist undertones in that as well.
Sure.
But yeah, whether you put it on it or whether it's there, whether it was intentional or not, this is definitely of that ilk. And so you have this group of this crew, science officer, first engineer, navigator, and two idiots underground, basically keeping the thing going. Great performances, but great performances by I don't think there's a fucking bad performance in this entire movie. I think Tom Skerritt Tom Skerritt as the broken down, tired captain. I mean, everything here is cliche. And at the beginning of this episode, I said that it's not innovative. It's not innovative in its story, but in its storytelling is where the innovation comes in. Does that make sense? Am I making sense with that?
It makes sense, but I want you to
elaborate.
Okay. Unpack that.
Yeah. Storytelling goes back to this idea that there's 7 stories. Guy loves girl.
There's all these different theories.
Yeah, like, there's the cliche of that angle. Yeah, it's
about plotting.
Yeah, the hero's journey, all of that shit. So this is a basic story built around that. What elevates it, and you got to give credit to Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett, is the sexual undertones of a creature grabbing hold of you, basically raping you somebody in a way, implanting a seed in them, and then having that seed destroy its way out of a body.
It's like a parasite.
It is a parasite. But
add fucking H.R. Giger, which we'll get into him. But
we'll get into that. His hypersexualization, his hypersexual visuals, which are just incredibly phallic and vaginal, and just a film that is filled with so much KY jelly. It's frightening. This film is an overwhelming.
That's why the plot moves so easily.
Yeah, in and out. There's a psychosexual element to this film. Also, when you take into account that this is a crew where there are undertones of sex. There's talk of sex. There's nothing blatant, but it's all there. And there was one thing that was left out of the film that I'm really happy that the creature itself wasn't sexualized. I don't know if that would have worked too well. I think that would have been, you know what I'm talking about?
What do you mean?
There were moments, and I don't know if it was O'Bannon and Shusett or Guyler Hill or Ridley Scott, but there were ideas that the creature itself would be sexually aroused by Ripley and may have raped Lambert. You didn't hear that in the Beast Within?
There were moments where they talk about in regard to Giger's Giger's eroticism, where there's a Lambert is Cartwright, right?
Yeah, Lambert's Cartwright.
She talks about the erotic sets.
Yeah.
And they talk about the sexual threat of the alien. But I don't know to what extent that they were actually going to depict that.
Ridley Scott wanted to get into that, and that's why I say thankfully, because it would have been more humorous than anything. I think it would have turned off audiences. I think.
Yeah, it would have been stupid.
It would have been stupid. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe maybe it would have worked. I don't know. Sam Raimi had a tree rape a woman in fucking Evil Dead, so I don't. But that was also, the ridiculousness of that. So I don't know.
But that was, I mean, that also was. Those were
very different
branches as tentacles versus a dick coming out of a tree. That's, you know what I mean. Like
but there are elements like where Lambert is attacked and killed, where the tail slowly moves up her legs, which are actually Harry Dean Stanton's legs, but that's the beauty of filmmaking, where you can cut it like that and put those two images together, and now this is where you're at. But do you remember she's it's very phallic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the mouth opens, and then a smaller mouth protrudes.
Yeah.
It comes out. And I mean, look, it's the thing is, it's big, black, with a big old head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And and
it would be hard to miss the symbolism unless you didn't want to see the symbolism. Yeah. Yeah.
And the face hugger grabs you and forces itself down your throat.
Yeah.
So it can implant the seed down there.
Well, they also say that the chest bursting scene bothers. I mean, I'm not a woman, so this would never occur to me as immediately as it does to a lot of people, as it was pointed out. I guess it kind of makes sense, where a lot of women were really bothered by that scene because there was an element of childbirth to it that really gets into the psyche. I don't think it's a far leap. I think it's a pretty accurate description of what you're seeing on that screen, and it's problematic as such. I think when you're watching John Hurt lie there, and this thing push out of his chest, and the blood, and it comes out of his cavity, it's like it's kind of hard not to see. It would be really interesting to see to hear a woman's opinion on that, because obviously it's going to be.
No, and I mean, but it's obviously, it's like, well, different women are going to fucking respond differently to fucking different things.
Sure.
So it's like, who the fuck are you talking to? You know what I mean? Like, that it's just because it's a thing coming out of someone's chest doesn't mean that it's like, oh yeah, that's, I mean, there's a metaphor there, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to be like, oh, I'm so disturbed because that reminds me of fucking when I gave birth to Timmy and he fucking took 12 hours to come out. You know what I mean? Like, that's weird.
When he chewed his way out, so.
And now he's killing me in life.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also the aspect of of a subconscious reading of the film
Sure,
without even realizing. I mean, how many times does a
sure.
film sit with you and you're like, why the fuck is that film still with me? What is it about this film that resonates that I can't completely grasp? There's been a number of films in my life where I'm sitting back and I'm overwhelmed by either the story or the performance or the character itself and how it relates to something that I've lived through or seen or maybe am. Or how many people read Travis Bickle in exactly the wrong fucking way? You know what I mean? So it's
Sure.
like there's so many elements to
Well, yeah. I mean,
how a film grabs a hold of you that you have to wonder what is being said here, um, and the fact that it's hitting me a certain way, is that relevant? Is it? I don't know.
and at
Yeah,
and at a certain particular time too, because it's like, okay, last week we talked about Nightcrawler,
yeah,
and we talked about all of these qualities that, in a different context, you would say, well, these are the qualities of a successful person,
hmm,
especially like in our culture,
yeah,
um, um, which is say American culture, where it's like, okay, the go get 'em attitude. You described it. He does the research. He
yeah,
does this. He he puts himself out there, but then it's like, well, um, to what end, and what is he willing to do to arrive at those places? Um, that's completely different than, the reluctant hero of the hero's journey who is like call to action but denies the call, and then meets his fucking guru or whatever, gets a magical object, meets the woman, fucking, and goes through this process. Um, Here we have, something that is definitely there's more Freudian stuff going on, because
hmm,
the creature itself also, in this film, but throughout the franchise, will have both masculine and feminine characteristics, um, and we can get into that further. But Ridley also, I think, story wise, as a character, is given these like more stereotypical, or archetypal, however you want to look at it, kind of feminine and so-called masculine characteristics, and there's going to be constantly that dynamic between the two, where, even the idea of like the ship itself and the operating system of the ship is called Mother.
hmm,
Um, so they're in this kind of like womb-like structure, or you go inside the alien ship, and it looks like innards, and there are all these bones, and there's this marriage because of Viger between the mechanical and the organic. Um, and Ridley is always like, when she gets pissed off, she's going to call somebody a bitch. Um, you bitch, oh, you bitch. She's calling the mother because the mother is going to blow up. Um, and at that point, what is that? That you're aborting the mission, right?
yeah.
Um, the the tentacle-like tail, but at the same time, it's like these aliens, um, are very, like, their mothers, they're female, the eggs. So there's a lot of stuff that really gets you. It's gonna get people's panties in a bunch, um, in a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
because of those ambiguities. Because it's like, not only like is it big, shiny, long, tall, black, and dangerous, um, it's also a mother, and that means don't fuck with its kids.
Well, that's something that
Um,
comes out in the next film,
yeah,
and
and I mean, that's what I'm saying.
but it's
You're gonna
difficult
see that.
because, and this is where I find it difficult to talk about this film in that respect. Is like in 1979, this was a standalone film
Nobody knew.
that had,
Yeah,
nobody knew what was going to happen. And to James Cameron's credit, he really fleshed out the story in a way that it could have gone. I'm sure 20th Century Fox would have been happy with just another alien on a spacecraft film. Just
Yeah.
remake the fucking
Based on a
movie.
plane.
Yeah, exactly. That they would have been thrilled with that. And to Cameron's credit, which is not always the smartest move, it's a bigger, louder, more violent, faster paced film. I can't say which is a better film only because they're so vastly different from one another.
And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. There's one that I think is better than the other, and then there's one that I enjoy more than the other. And I'm not going to say that, but it's weird.
I think we know.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy. The second film is a fucking roller coaster ride, but it's a really well done roller coaster ride. It's amazing. This is what is in that shadow. And where the second film is 185-1 and this film is 235-1, for a long time I asked myself, why the fuck would Cameron go back to a smaller aspect ratio? And I think it's because the second film is more claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
And a 185-1 aspect ratio is definitely more claustrophobic, whereas a 235-1, especially in limited space like this film is. And if you notice, a lot of this film is handheld camera because it's a confined set. So
yeah.
Ridley Scott, who did camera work on this film, all of the handheld camera is him. He had to get in there and move that camera around. But it being widescreen, it gives you a bigger visual sense while at the same time confusing your brain as there's less space. So it's almost like an optical illusion where it's a bigger canvas, but it's a smaller amount of space. And that fucking thing can be anywhere. That's not something that comes out as prevalent in the second film. The second film is they're everywhere all the time, and it goes into he pulls a great deal out of the Vietnam War because so much of that is they're in the air ducts, which is a stand-in for the tunnels.
Tunnels, yeah.
Yeah, so the Xenomorphs are I don't know, if I were Vietnamese, I might be pissed off about this film because it's a little bit, maybe it is racist. I don't know. But it is definitely a stand-in allegory. I don't know, for Vietnam. This film is just a straight up old-fashioned monster movie set in space. So whereas Ridley Scott took the film noir genre and put it in space. Not even put it in space. He put it in the future. In LA. Yeah, in LA, in the future. It's sci-fi because it's in the future. There is the feeling of space. There is the what was that?
I said and androids.
Yeah, and androids. And these motherfuckers are off planet. They come back. So there's this sensibility that it might be 2022 or whatever it is in that movie, but
21, 22 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. It's a far more advanced 2022 than what we were in. I didn't see that fucking place get shut down by the flu. So, it was a different idea. But what his brilliance is taking genre and placing them in settings that don't seem to necessarily embrace that kind of thing. This could have been set on... Alien could have been set on... What was the ship that brought Dracula? Wasn't that called the Nostromo?
No.
Where does the Nostromo come from? It's from some...
Joseph Conrad book.
Is it Heart of Darkness?
Joseph Conrad book that... Huh?
Is it Heart of Darkness?
No. Heart of Darkness is on the African continent, and that's...
No, but is that the name of the ship in... Because he's on a boat.
No,
I don't know.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, we have to look it up. Yeah.
It's not Nostromo. Nostromo is a Joseph Conrad novel.
Oh, it is the name of a book. Okay.
Yeah, and it's about from what I know about it, it's about like a shipmate who is very brave,
Mm-hmm.
but is exploited by his society, and becomes very like embittered by that. And I mean, you know, cough cough, fucking Sigourney Weaver's Ripley, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the Nostromo.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay. So the point of what I'm saying here is with the aspect ratio 235, it's confusing because you don't know where to look sometimes. You're looking up after a certain point you start to wonder, where the fuck is this thing? And you're looking and you're looking and you're looking. And then it's strange because Ridley Scott, Dan O'Bannon, she said they have this thing slowly evolve like a caterpillar, I guess, or whatever. Lays the egg, bursts out of the body, as some insects do in
Well, wait.
there are
Yeah.
insects that do this.
So let's go through that process. So it's in an egg pod.
Yeah.
So obviously
There's a
there
queen.
are eggs that get laid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a queen. So then the egg pod hatches, and then this crab-like, scorpion-like looking thing emerges from the egg and attaches to the face. That's the face hugger.
Yeah.
And it puts this penile type of organ down a host's throat, and it implants a seed. And so then it sheds off once that seed is developing. And then that's when the chest burster phase, that now chest burster creature emerges by bursting out of the chest, of what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
Then it fucking screams and runs around, and then it grows very quickly and it sheds its like old skin. Then it's a fucking adult and it kills. And that thing, that those different versions that you see, because Dan O'Bannon had worked with and been exposed to the work of H.R. Giger in pre-production for Jodorowsky's Dune, he was familiar with this style. Giger was a Swiss, at that time, primarily airbrush painter who did a lot of like biomechanical shit. He did a lot of it's like organisms, but they're also machines. Very sexual. He did the design he was going to do the design for the Harkonnen aspect of Dune, the villains.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of dark tones, a lot of dark colors, but with also metallic looks. And I remember my grandmother was in the hospital, and I was like looking through these magazines, and I remember just being like captivated by what was his work. He was featured in I don't know what kind of magazine. I don't know if it was like some Fangoria thing, or I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But his stuff was very sexual, but very mysterious and somewhat insect-like. He ended up he did a portrait of Debbie Harry for one of her albums. He did an album cover for Emerson, Lake and Palmer. That's pretty famous. He did Frankenchrist from the Dead Kennedys. He did Danzig's third album, How the Gods Kill. So he did a lot of music stuff too.
Before Alien or
museum.
after?
These were after.
Okay.
And he might have done stuff from before. ELP might have been before. But the Debbie Harry would have been in the 80s, probably early 80s. Danzig was already in the 90s. And there were all these, he comes onto the Alien set once. Dan O'Bannon kind of brings this team, and he's dressed all in black, and he has this weird accent to them, and he's like quirky. He's funny, but he's also weird, and he has this like morbid sensibility, and his vision is there's nothing like it. It's very unique. If you're not familiar with H.R. Giger, Hans-Rudi Giger, look him up. You've probably seen stuff outside of Alien or in conjunction with, but he designed all of the concepts, the look, the organic yet mechanical.
He designed what he designed. Let's be specific about this. He designed everything having to do with the alien. So he designed the egg, he designed the space jockey, he designed the ship that the space jockey flew, and he designed the alien itself.
The space jockey is this astronaut, basically, this giant astronaut that they find when, okay, what's the premise? Before we get into that, because we're jumping around. What's the premise? Okay, these truckers in space get a signal. They're going to head home, but they get a signal, and now they're rerouted to this planet. So they land on the planet, and 3 of them go out on this expedition. In that process, they find the ruins of a ship. On that ship, they find this giant, in this basically cockpit seat. And around that area, they find these eggs. John Hurt's character is basically attacked by a face hugger. So now they want to bring him back onto the ship. Sigourney Weaver's character is like, fuck no, you're going to contaminate the ship. They're like, fuck you, let us on. Ian Holm's character, Ash, opens the bay door so they can enter. And so now what ends up happening is this alien is aboard the ship. All hell is going to fucking break loose. The reason is that the corporation that they work for, and we're going to get into the social aspects in a little while, had an ulterior motive. It knew about this species, it knew about this organism, and the rerouting, the purpose of the rerouting was specifically to retrieve a sample and bring it back.
Yeah.
And in that process, the crew was deemed expendable. And so now the ship is on, the alien is on board, and who the fuck's gonna die, in what order, how, and who's gonna survive. That's the movie.
Yeah.
Going back to Giger, he designs all of what you described. He's designing the you went into it. Sorry, continue because I cut you off.
That's basically the world of the alien. So the ship, this it's fucking it's strange. It's like the inside of some kind of a beast, of an animal. Where the world, the spacecraft of the space jockey, which you don't even know what one of the great things about this film, and you don't really find out anything until I think either Prometheus or Alien Covenant. You don't find out what the space jockey is. You don't find out what's going on with that. It's and by the time you get to that movie, it's like a real That's a real fucking leap that you have to make as a filmmaker to explain something, because whatever the fuck it is that we were thinking might be greater than what Ridley Scott was able to realize. We'll get to that in a few weeks, but you have no idea what this thing is or where it comes from, but it's alluded to, and there's some foreshadowing of what's going to happen here, because when they find the space jockey, they look at it and they see bones that look like they were burst from the inside.
Yep.
And Tom Skerritt comments on that, and that's when
foreshadowing.
Yeah, foreshadowing. That's when when John Hurt's character Kane finds that hole and decides he's going to lower himself into that. And what's the first thing he says? It's like the goddamn tropics in here. Well, that alone should have been a warning to you. That's an incubator. They're growing something down there. And when he gets down into it and he sees these eggs that have this film of light, I thought was hilarious, because they pulled it off of a Pink Floyd light show. I love the way movies work sometimes. The inspiration that you implement into whatever story you're making. Just because Pink Floyd is in the next soundstage working on their tour, and boom, Ridley Scott.
And they would have been in Dune also, so fuck it,
Yeah, exactly. Why not? There's the connection there. So, here you have Kane going into this world, and this is where it becomes, get the fuck out of there. This becomes that moment where you're yelling at the screen, get the fuck out of there. What is wrong with you? But whenever I've heard that, get the fuck out of there, or fuck the cat, or leave the cat, or whatever they say,
right,
you really got to ask yourself, what would you do in a situation? There is curiosity there. There is people think that they're indestructible. People think that they're infallible, that they can't be touched. So to look into that egg seemed like a very natural, realistic thing to do. Although, as I'm watching it, I think, I've seen this shit in movies too many times. I would get the fuck out of there. Mm-hmm. That's what I would do. But
get the fuck out of there, yeah. And you have no story.
You have no story. Yeah, you have no story. Is it, the point of what I'm saying, though, is it a natural human action? You're goddamn right it is. Of course it is. People do this shit all the time.
Stick your dick in it. You know what I mean? People are fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
And ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's probably an aspect of I can make money off of this.
Yes.
This is going to make me rich.
Mm-hmm. Well, that goes back up to the, Parker and Brett. They want to share.
Yeah.
You guys are getting a full share. We're getting half a share. If we find anything out there, what happened? And, that's a real conversation. That's a class conversation. These are, you hear Yaphet Kotto's character say a number of times, I'm not contracted for this. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Let's hold off on that, because I think that's going to break open the episode into let's pull back and stay in production mode, and then get into what the meaning is,
okay, they're definitely two separate things. I want to ask you something. Yeah,
I want to ask you something about all that, because it's definitely big on my list too. Mm-hmm. But going back to Giger,
mm-hmm. Well, so Giger creates these. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You have this. I'll jump off of you. So mm-hmm. Giger creates these sets and these designs that are sleek, and they look both ancient and futuristic somehow.
Yeah.
And there's a dark beauty to them, even though they look grotesque. And there are stories around him, and this kind of, I think, helps. I think it probably helped just the atmosphere of the filmmaking, but in hindsight, or now looking back on the film, it also helps the mystique of that, is that these stories how he would use these bones. He had actual animal bones, and at that point there were stories. He was married to a woman named Mia. At that point, I think that was his second wife. I don't know if it could be first. I don't know if this was the first one was his fiance or his wife. I don't remember. But
Yeah.
her name was Lee Tobler, and she had committed suicide. And there were rumors, I mean false, but there were rumors that he had kept her skeleton in his house.
Yeah, they talked about that in the documentary.
And there were stories about her having killed herself. She shot herself in the head, and that one of his paintings was behind her, and supposedly the bullet was powerful enough to exit her skull, and that there was blood splattered on one of his paintings and a hole in it or something like that. And so all of this like crazy shit surrounding the monster, right?
Yeah.
Now add the atmosphere of the film, the lights, the flashing, the darkness, the chiaroscuro elements, the steam in the machine, right? Wind, fog, all of that. Claustrophobic, but also like labyrinthine when you're going through those tunnels.
Yeah.
Add the Jerry Goldsmith score.
Mm-hmm.
I love Jerry Goldsmith's music. Add that. So you're in this fucking realm, and whether it's the planet or the ship, it looks cool, but it looks different than 2001. 2001 looks somewhat boring in terms of the technology of the ships. This shit looks dirty, and it looks it looks kind of like you go to Disneyland and they have the Star Wars land.
Mm-hmm.
It's, for however many years it's been around, several years, a couple of years. And what I like about Star Wars land is that I get a sense that I don't know where the fuck I am. I mean, it's new to me because I've only been there once this past year. We had held off. But the buildings, the design, it's really well designed because the buildings, it looks like you're in a different place. It doesn't even look like you're in Disneyland itself.
Yeah.
And the different buildings, you don't know what they are. You get closer and you're like, okay, this is a store. Okay, this is the bar, restaurant bar, whatever, the cantina, whatever. This is, where's the fucking ride? Where's the ride? You know what I mean? You start to lose your patience, but in the best way. And you're like, where's the fucking ride? Like, I don't know where anything is. And so that makes you feel like you're in a real place because that's kind of like how you feel in a real place.
Yeah.
Shit is not labeled for you. Where's the fucking bathroom? Where is the bathroom? And you have to fucking go, you have to ask. And there are two rides there. And one of them is this like big, really immersive thing with a long as fuck line that actually it's like, okay, like that's cool. It was worth it. The other is you're in the Millennium Falcon and you get to like, you can either be an engineer or a pilot or whatever. And so there's something about it that is kind of gritty and dirty. And that makes it that much more cool because it's a juxtaposition of advancement, this technology that we don't have, but at the same time it feels retro and it feels gritty. It feels like you can it feels somehow like of the 80s, which was very wanting to be of the future. But when we think about it now, it's kind of like it's future, but it's also kind of rinky dink. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And you know, a joystick. Like that's how this feels to me. But with all of the mystique and all of the atmosphere, that just leads to something that I don't know. I don't know if some fucking zillennial were to watch this film, I don't know if they would feel the same way because they didn't experience the 80s. Having experienced the 80s and all of its Reaganomic glory, there's something about watching a movie from that time that it puts this layer on it, that this nostalgia for a future that never happened type of this tone that I really enjoy. And Ridley Scott was able to do that with Blade Runner, and he was able to do that with this. So then now we're truckers in space with them, and I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, this is a metaphor for the fucking horror of fucking corporate work.
Sure.
This is fucking blue collar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm laughing because I'm like thinking about you watching it, and we've got Yaphet Kotto complaining about money at his job, and I'm like, here we go. I can see Rick fucking down there bullshitting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, where you're sitting there and you know the fucking, you know, there's a point where Yaphet's walking with Harry Dean Stanton, and he's like, you know, this is where the work is, down here. You don't see those motherfuckers come down here. They don't know what we're doing. You know, we're keeping this thing going. And he's right. He's right to a degree, you know. There's a lot of shit that's going on upstairs, you know. It's like, when I work my job, I know I'm the blood and guts of the job. Yeah, the managers and the supervisors are necessary to a degree, but they don't do what I do. They do not go out there, you know, there's not, we're the ones making the fucking, you know, keeping the doors open, the lights on. We're the one making sure that the product is out there, wherever, you know, in whatever aspect, the person on the ground, the men and women on the ground who are, you know, whatever you want to call it, who are cutting this or putting it out or driving the forklift.
Keeping the engine running.
Yeah, keeping the engine running, who are teaching the kids, who are cooking the food. We're the ones that are, you know, granted, this other asshole took a chance by taking a big chunk of change and building that business. But at the end of the day, we're the ones, workers of the world, you know, so fuck it. But as I was watching it, it just cracked me up that 200 some odd years in the future, the same fucking problems are there. There's something about there is something about human beings and our capacity for greed that really defines us. And you see it in this movie. And Weyland-Yutani, which is, I don't know what the relationship between Weyland-Yutani and Weyland, the Weyland from Blade Runner. But I think Ridley Scott has commented that these two worlds exist parallel to each other.
Because it's Tyrell Corporation.
It is a Tyrell Corporation, yeah. And
Dallas works for fucking Tyrell.
Yeah.
And those are the ones who make the fucking slaves, the android slaves.
I don't know if that's as apparent in this film, but it becomes more so in Prometheus and Covenant, I believe. I think you actually see the what do you call it? The emblem. You might see it in the second film as well. I'm not sure. One of the great things about doing an episode like this or the subsequent episodes that we are about to do is revisiting films that we thought we knew. I know this film and I know the second film pretty well. I know the third film pretty well too. I draw a blank on the fourth film, and the prequels are so recent that I haven't had a chance to go back to them yet. But even watching this last night, there were nuances of it that I wasn't really aware of. I hadn't watched this film. In preparing for this episode, I couldn't help but start thinking about Cameron's film. So as I was watching this, I was also playing scenes from Cameron's film in my head. And it struck me as very interesting that Cameron's film is so much more in your face, balls to the wall action. It's an action film. It's a war film. This is more like Halloween. This is a horror film. And I think because of that, this being a horror film and that being a war film, the idea of them being science fiction films kind of drifts away. I don't know if you feel that way. I kind of feel like one genre, or at least to me, one genre manifests itself to a greater degree than the other. It's almost like science fiction is a setting. It's a background and it's a setting. Whereas, you know what I mean?
These in many ways are also just tags. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they speak more to either a way that a film can be marketed, or a way that a film can be critiqued, or a way that a film, even before it's a film as a screenplay, kind of what's the approach to to the writing of it? You know what I mean? Like, if you have an art film, you're going to have already built into the project a distance. So you're not necessarily meant to have this great empathy with a character, because that's secondary to either a message or some kind of aesthetic that's trying to be pushed, or some kind of experiment, or some kind of result that Tarkovsky doing Solaris is not so much about the name of that particular character, but it's more about a kind of a meditation on who are we in terms of like our processes, our dreams, our hopes, our thoughts, and itself, it's just a vehicle to do that. Versus George Lucas wants to tell a big story, or you know what I mean, or Game of Thrones is a big fucking soap opera, and who's fucking whom, and who's going to be king, and how does this go up and this go down, and all these plots and all this and that. And here it's kind of like it's got elements of all this other shit. It's got elements of that whole class struggle. Yeah, Yaphet Kotto and Dean Stanton are down below, literally. They're in the bowels, and there are a lot of bowels in this fucking film.
Yeah, there are.
They are in the bowels of this fucking ship, and they're not in the upper echelons, literally or figuratively. They're not making decisions. They're just following orders, and they have to fight for what they think is right in terms of their compensation. The company, the corporation, has its own motives, its own what seem to be secondary motives, but they're actually the primary motives. It wants the alien. Bring back the alien life form. That's priority one. The crew is what? The crew is expendable. This is fucking corporate greed.
Yeah.
At its fucking finest. Ash, Ian Holm's character, is literally a corporate android. That's literally what he is. And he's there to undermine the crew and serve the company's interests first.
Yeah. See, this is where the film really takes off for me, because now there's a level of paranoia that is injected into this film that is not simply, where is this creature? Now it's like, who the fuck can I even trust? That's,
right.
like, it was weird because as I was watching this film both times, I was thinking a lot about Carpenter's film. I was thinking a lot about The Thing. And
Absolutely.
it's and I've never watched this film and thought about The Thing. I've never watched The Thing and thought about Alien. They're two completely different films in my mind, but if you look at them on paper, you can draw those parallels real, you can connect the
For
fucking
sure.
dots with these two films. I mean, guys out there, space truckers in one, you know, basically blue collar guys doing research in Antarctica and the other, and this creature where they don't know where it is. Where is it hiding? What is it? Um,
Yeah. Is it in an animal?
yeah,
In one it's a dog, and the other it's a cat, and you're like, what the fuck?
yeah. I mean, think about the catch lines on this one. In space, no one can hear you scream. Man is the warmest place to hide. I mean, it's. I'm gonna have to, like I need an excuse to watch The Thing again, but yeah, at some point I'm gonna
Right.
have to watch it again in order to
Fits
gather
in the
my thoughts
context.
on this. Yeah, because and it really bugs the shit out of me that a few years later The Thing would eat it because of the changing attitude about aliens. And I think Ridley Scott's film, based on the reaction, I don't know if those are extreme descriptions where they talk about people running out of the theater and throwing up, or I mean, it seems
Yeah.
kind
I
of
mean,
exaggerated, but
that's also marketing too.
that is yeah, you know. Um, John Waters once said, "If somebody pukes in a film of mine, that's like a standing ovation." That's that's this idea that it's that horrific, that it's that bad. That it's the same story of somebody. Didn't somebody have a heart attack or something in The Exorcist, or that's the legend at least that somebody just
I mean, yeah. It's just even Jodorowsky himself, that it's like with Fando and Lis in Mexico City, that there were riots, and
yeah.
it's it's all it's all P.T. Barnum.
It is. It's just, build this thing up so that you can. But I think with Alien and the fear of that creature, that thing that has no eyes, that is just teeth, that is slime, that there is no escaping from it, it is so fearful. I think that made it. I think that made Spielberg's E.T. something that people needed. So in a weird
Yeah,
way,
something cute that wasn't gonna fuck you.
yeah. So in a way, I think, yeah, Carpenter's film was dragged down by the cuteness of E.T., but E.T. was in response to the terror of the xenomorph. I think
Yeah.
and I'm not sure which one is scarier. I mean, face to face, the creature in this film is scarier. Psychologically, the thing is scarier.
Well, I would argue that
I'm
face
not
to
talking about the
face, the
movies. I'm
thing
talking
is
about I'm
scarier.
talking the actual beast. What
No,
do you,
this is what I'm.
okay.
To me, it's both,
Mm-hmm.
because here's my take,
Yeah.
is that the alien is the alien is the alien.
Mm-hmm.
The thing could be the alien or any other fucking thing that you can't even imagine what it would be.
Yeah.
So face to face, it's kind of like you don't know what thing you're gonna get.
That's right.
So, and to add to your psychological aspect of it, it's like, am I the thing? I mean,
Yeah.
do you know if you're the thing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so that's
But in
an
this thing,
interesting.
yeah, it's. I mean,
Dad,
I think it's fascinating. I think it really is, and
all right, we have to do it.
we have to at some point, And in this
The
film,
thing, we're gonna do a comparison. We have to.
we have to.
I wanna see. I wanna watch these films back to back
Mm-hmm.
and see how they play against one another.
Yeah.
Because from special effects involving the chest when someone's on a table,
Mm-hmm.
to all these other elements, I really want to look at it technically, and I also want to look at it in terms of the social aspect of, like, who's this main character who is torn between like following the rules but also doing what needs to happen,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And ultimately needs to fucking abandon shit, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there are parallels. I think it would be a great discussion. I'm interested in having it. One thing with both films, the difficulty though is watching him from the perspective of a lot of this is the shock of seeing something that you weren't sure of. Now, when I saw this film, and I think I saw Aliens before I saw Alien.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens was like 85. I would have been about 9 or 10, you know?
That's a possibility.
It's a very, I mean, and it's the brilliance of that film that Cameron does such a beautiful job of retelling the story so that you're not lost. You know, between Cameron retelling the story in Ripley's interrogation and Sigourney Weaver going back to that character, you really don't miss a beat. But the point of what I'm saying is that when I first watched this movie, number one, I was 79. I was fucking 5 years old, so I don't think I saw it then. But I think that by the time I had seen it, I already knew about a chest burster. I knew that something was going to come out of John Hurt. It's one of the great losses. It's one of the great cinematic losses where you as a movie watcher are not going to have that moment of holy fuck, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel that was robbed, but I still got to say, even watching it last night, the tension that is building as you know John Hurt is about to start choking and coughing, and Yaphet sitting there joking around with him, and they flip him over, and it's just like, oh my God, if this is this intense right now for me, what would it have been like if I had no idea that was going to happen?
In a theater in fucking 79.
Exactly. And so it's like, I mean, because I know you would have, as a moviegoer, I think you would have been sitting there going, well, something has to happen. There's no way that thing just died and fell off its face. Yeah, there's no movie. How the fuck? And then you see something like that, and it bursts through his chest and come out, and you know, and you're like, fuck. But also, at the time, and this is one of those situations where you have to look back on it. Nobody knew who Sigourney Weaver was. Yaphet Kotto was a character actor that had done a Bond film and Blue Collar and a couple of blaxploitation films. I think he had done Across 110th Street. And
what year was Blue Collar?
Blue Collar was 77, I think. Yeah, 77 or 78 because Taxi Driver was 76, so he got it 77, 78, and that was his first film. And I think this was coming out at the same time that Hardcore was coming out, because Hardcore was 78, 79, wasn't it? So I think Blue Collar was 77.
Yeah, late 70s, early 80s, something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, Harry Dean had been floating around for years, but just as a character actor. Veronica Cartwright had just done Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a small supporting role in there. Ian Holm had done film, but was more of a character actor. The point of what I'm saying, Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, and Tom Skerritt is given top billing in this film. Nobody knew who any of these people were. So when you went into, now, John Hurt was the Elephant Man, John Hurt was this, John Hurt was that, you know, Harry Dean, Ian Holm. I know all these people. I can name off a number, but they were only character actors. And I think for the rest of their career, they were pretty much basically character actors, except for Sigourney Weaver. The point on what I'm saying is that you didn't know who was going to survive this thing. Right. You're set up to believe that it's the captain, it's a man, he's got top billing, he's going to survive. and it becomes Sigourney Weaver. I don't know watching this movie if I would have known what the fuck was going to happen. Like
Right.
I would have been
Yeah, I
sitting
mean,
there going, "What the fuck is the? Oh, well, they just killed him. What? Now you just
who's next?
yeah, you just killed Janet Leigh. What? No, now where's the fucking movie
Right.
going? What the hell are you going to do?
Plus, even within the structure, the structured stereotype that they talk about in horror noir, Yaphet Kotto
Mhm.
defies that because he's not the first to die in this either.
No.
So it even defies that because it's like, well, if there were this concept then
Mhm.
of the black guy dies first, which a lot of that stuff was later set up in the 80s,
Yeah.
and then commented on in Screen, it's already the exception, because and if you think, well, who is the first to die? Maybe there's evidence to say that, or not evidence, but maybe there's something that's going to be like, well, maybe it's going to be Sigourney Weaver herself because she's the one that didn't want it to come in, and then she dies, and then you go, she was right.
Yeah.
You know?
It's very interesting that Sigourney Weaver's character is the only one that is she's the one that gets it. Her and Parker's like, freeze it. Let's freeze the goddamn thing. Why, why are we, let's freeze his body and get the fuck out of here. We don't, he and Harry Dean is just kind of high throughout the film, just kind of stumbling through it. I love his performance. Right. I love everybody. But this is, I guess this is about as perfect a film. I can't imagine a moment that could be changed that would make this film better. I think the theatrical cut is pretty fucking on point. I think it's I wish that he had kept Veronica Cartwright slapping Sigourney Weaver, but that's the only thing. Huh?
Smacking the shit out of her.
Yeah, she just smacks the shit out of her. That moment is great. I think it's such a fucking
there were a lot of those moments. Let's talk about Ash, the reveal that he's a fucking android.
That's another thing where it's like, you're just like, fuck. And it's so beautifully done. And, where Yaphet knocks you're sitting there and you're like, what the fuck is, I remember watching it as a kid thinking, what the fuck is that white shit coming out of his head?
Yeah, right.
Why, Well,
because here's how it plays out.
Yeah.
All hell's fucking breaking loose, and Sigourney Weaver now wants to confront Ash because he's the one who originally opened that door.
Mm-hmm.
So she's asking questions, and throughout he's the scientific director or whatever the character's title is.
Yeah, the chief science officer, I think is what they call him.
Chief science officer. There you go. And so he's very cold, very what you would think that the chief science officer would be, right? Mm-hmm. He's very mechanical, but you just think that that's his personality, right?
But it's weird because
go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, and we'll get to this next week. But if you compare his performance to Lance Henriksen as Bishop in the next film, right. Henriksen leans into it being an android. He's very much an android that wants to be more human. Ian Holm plays it like he's human. Like he doesn't want, and it's interesting because there's a short description where Ripley asked Dallas, the captain, have you worked with him before? And she was like, no, there was a different, I went out with a different science officer for the last 6 missions. And then we got this guy 2 weeks before, right. So they want him to be seen as a human being. Right. It's not just that Ridley Scott and O'Bannon and I think this was Walter Hill and Geiler's input. It's not just that they want the audience to see that, to think that Ash is a human being who turns out to be a robot. The company wants
The company
the
the story.
Yeah, the company in the story, that when you start opening those boxes and start seeing other boxes inside the boxes, that's where it starts becoming that thing where it's like, wait a minute, there's a lot more layers to this. This is a commentary on corporate spying, corporate thievery, that kind of thing, where they're going out of their way to put one of their own in there who's not going to be emotional, who's not going to be drawn into this fear. And it's creepy as fuck. And Ian Holm he smiles in weird ways. It's creepy as fuck. Yeah.
Right. But that's the thing, is like, if you don't know, then you don't fucking know.
No, you don't know.
When you know, you're going back and you're saying like, oh, this shit looks subtle, but it also looks obvious.
Yeah.
Of course he's the one who lets the alien in. Of course he does that.
But that could just be because, first of all, I'm a paranoid bastard and I hate corporations as it is. So I would already be saying, that's a corporate guy. That's the snitch. That's the guy that's going to go back.
Yeah.
And, this is the guy that, they've already talked to. This is Paul Reiser's character. This is the company man who is trying to do everything he can to protect the what do you call it? The product, the investment. But then when you see, and Reiser's character is just a fucking weasel. He's a low-life scumbag weasel. That's not Ash. Ash is, in a weird way, is evil. Because he's been programmed as such, to not give a fuck about human beings, to not give a fuck about what it would mean to actually bring this thing back and the danger. It's just a matter of, there's a fascination from a computer analytical standpoint, but there's also, this is what the masters want.
Yeah, he's just a tool. They're tools too, but he's a tool that doesn't have that emotional filter.
Yeah, but that's the thing. They're tools that are going to get drunk and get high and fuck later. And it's gonna rationalize everything for them. That rationalizes the trip, the 8-hour day, the work, the effort, the going away from our families. It's earning. Ash isn't that. Ash is a machine. He is a literal tool. Oh, it's fucked. Fuck you for making me watch this movie and creeping me out even more.
And what's crazy is that although he's a machine, there are still sexual elements.
Yeah.
There's still these. So they get into it, and then Sigourney Weaver's character gains access to the mother, so she finds out basically what the real deal is, right?
Well,
the real deal is
without knowing that Ash is a robot. Yes, the purpose of the mission. That Ash is a robot,
right? Yeah. She finds out about the mission. Then they have this physical altercation, and he starts to sweat this like milky-looking substance.
Yeah.
So it's already like coming out of the context of the mother, and now this stooge is dripping milk.
That's creepy as fuck. Yeah.
And he's starting to like fucking malfunction and not know how to act around her, which it sounds like an adolescent to me. And then he fucking gets her and pins her down. And on the walls of the ship are nudes.
Yeah.
These like Playboy type magazine cutouts that are posted onto the wall. And he gets a magazine and he rolls it up.
Whose are those? They have to be his, right?
I don't know if they I was assuming that they were either going to be Harry Dean's character or Yaphet Kotto's character.
Harry Dean and Yaphet would have been down below.
I mean, but do they sleep down below? They just work down below. Because they eat upstairs with everyone else.
I don't know. I mean, it
I
would
don't
have to
know.
be. It would have to. I don't know.
I just pictured that it would be fucking Harry Dean Stanton's because it's Harry Dean Stanton.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but there's a creepier aspect of Ash's.
Yeah, what if it's Ash?
Yeah,
and
what if
he's
it's
like,
Ash and that desire to push the humanoid aspect of it, or to move closer
right,
to a
the
human?
narrative.
Yeah.
Or what if he's fucking like, you know, once we get into the Prometheus thing, like, what if he's like jealous? What if he wants to be?
Yeah.
You know, who knows? But these are all things to speculate, to play with.
Yeah.
But he rolls up this fucking magazine, and he could easily probably just snap Ridley's neck or choke her or something. No, he wants to. She's face up. She's supine, and he gets this rolled up magazine, and he's trying to force it down her throat.
Yeah.
Into her mouth. So already that's like a parallel to the face hugger forcing down that penis. This time he's like, he wants to silence her, but literally it's like, is it a so-called dirty magazine that he's doing it with? So there's it's violence, there's sex, and ultimately Yaphet Kotto comes to, because he's very heroic in the film.
Yeah.
He comes and he knocks the head off, and this thing just is like oozing milk. And when they replug in his head, he's like, he has this milky fluid coming out of his mouth, almost like sap.
Yeah.
And he starts to talk about.
Well, if you look at it, it's kind of weird because he's covered in it. It might be covered in cum. You know, it's just like he came. It was like that was
right.
It's really fucking creepy. Really creepy.
Yeah. And he's talking about the structured perfection of the alien. And when I heard that, I'm like, this is the film. This is also film, like the structured perfection of the film that we're watching. And he admires the alien for its purity because it's a survivor. And I said, well, that's fucking Ripley. We don't know it yet, but that's fucking Ripley.
Yeah.
She's a survivor. And he describes the alien as being unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. And obviously he's similar because he's programmed that way.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, it's the corporation that is unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. The corporation that they work for is just as fucking horrible as the alien. The difference is the alien, who knows what, if it doesn't have this kind of conscience, it has consciousness, but not to the level of like self-awareness of like, this is, maybe I shouldn't do this. This is what the alien does, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what it is. And later on, we're going to see some of that process and how it became that way. But the corporation and the corporate interests, they fucking know what they're doing and they don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
So they're the actual villains for setting this whole fucking thing up. That's the fucking, like, that's the story behind the story.
Well, I mean,
now,
you know, if you could also say the alien itself is not a bad guy. The alien is just fighting for its survival. It's doing what it does. Yeah, he's just fighting for its survival.
It's an organism.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a sense, it's just like a mama bear.
Yeah.
Like, don't fuck with the cubs, you know? Like, this is what it is. We think of, like, vermin and cockroaches and shit like that as disgusting. And I mean, cockroaches are disgusting.
Yes.
But
yeah.
like,
empathize.
That's just what they are.
Yeah.
That's just what they fucking are.
It's going to fight for survival. It's going to do what it has to do in order to save itself and protect its own future.
Right.
So it's this movie is about this movie is about corporate greed. This movie is, I mean, it's, I don't know if Ridley Scott had that in mind. I don't know if O'Bannon and those guys were thinking that immediately, but I think there's an aspect of the human experience that informs a story, and you can't get away from that kind of thing. And you ask yourself, would would a corporate organization do something like this? And I'm real quick to say, fuck yeah, they would. Without
I
question,
mean,
without doubt,
of
they
course,
would do it. Yeah.
of course they would fucking do it. Of course they would fucking do it. Um, Even there's also a metaphor of like, think about, and we've talked about this in various other films where we talked about Gilliam's Tideland as a metaphor for his own experience as a director in the industry.
Yeah.
To be this orphan, to be this fucking person who watches his dreamland fucking destroyed. Think about, I mean, I watch Alien and I also see the metaphor of Hodorowski. He's gathering together this team, but in the place that he feels that he's the safest, which is this ship that he's trying to like navigate towards somewhere, there are all these outside forces that come in and fucking destroy it and pull all these people away that end up in this other movie.
Yeah.
I see that. I see the industry as kind of like the Nostromo. I see these projects as the Nostromo, and people on these projects as members of the crew, directors, writers, and I see these studios as the Tyrell Corporation having their own motives, which I mean, this in terms of filmmaking, the motives are obvious. They're not underlying. They're at the top of the fucking page as well. On the top of the page is the bottom line. It's the money. But still, they bring in these outside or, producers coming in and saying, well, you're not going to use this set because it's going to cost too much.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck. You're not using it. Fuck you. So there is a metaphor for that. Luckily, Olowski survived. His career survived fucking his personal Nostromo. But there is that. I also was looking at I was also looking at Ripley, and I was thinking about something that we've talked about before in the context of Brian De Palma, in the context of Peckinpah,
Yeah.
and horror, and it's how do we view women in fear? How do we watch them? Because there's the moment where she's in the shuttle and she takes off her clothes, and now she has the little wife beater, which I could have said tank top, but I didn't do that on purpose. It just, that's also what words did I use, right?
Yeah.
Wife beater, no bra, panties, and I'm asking myself, I'm like, like this goes back to what we've been talking about, the final girl, these horror tropes, violence against women, all the stuff like that, and not coming from this fucking, whether you want to call it woke or fucking bleeding heart liberal or whatever perspective, but just as a self-awareness, and as a kind of like, this is fucking interesting. Like, how do we look at these things? And I'm watching her because I'm like, now I'm of a split mind because I'm still interested in the story and I'm still interested in what happens to the character, but I'm also just visually checking out this woman on the screen in front of me. And it's like, well, how do we view these women in fear in these films? Well, they're partially naked, their eyes are wide open, they're breathing heavily. we're keyed in, we're keyed up.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, are we Ash at that point? Because Ash, before he dies, says in a mocking tone, "You have my sympathy."
Yeah. Smiles.
And he smiles, and it's kind of like, are we Ash? Like, does she have our sympathy in this moment, but not our empathy? Because I'm looking at this film as a man. Like, I'm looking at this film, especially moments like that. The director confronts you with it in such a way that it's like, well, no, I'm looking at fucking Sigourney Weaver's body, definitely with the male gaze. And I'm not like, oh my God, like I'm confessing my sins for doing that. I'm doing that that's a natural response as a male mammal, as far as I'm concerned.
I think you're right.
And so I'm fucking like visually checking her out. I'm looking at her fucking flat stomach. I'm looking at her hip bone. I'm looking at her perky breasts. But I'm still fucking like, you gotta survive, right?
Yeah.
But it's like that question: are we Ash? How much is sympathy? How much is empathy? We like checking Ripley out because it's a visual medium, and that's what it's about with her skimpy underwear. Are we also the monster?
Well, the question though is it
wants to hug her face and put a seed down her throat. There's elements of that too, in that kind of like, in the layers of our consciousness, there is that deep down fucking hairy Dean Stanton, Yaphet Kotto layer that's just a blue collar asshole with the fucking nudes posted on the wall. That's like, yeah, she looks hot here. I hope she doesn't die. You know what I mean? Like, versus a higher level, like more nuanced, blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, I've wondered that. I did wonder it, but I mean, is the moment gratuitous, or is it organic?
No.
She is getting ready to go into hypersleep. She is getting ready to just,
of course.
And
I don't think it needs to be justified. I don't think it needs to be, even if she wasn't getting ready to go into fucking hypersleep. The question of something being gratuitous, I think, in a visual medium like film is kind of, in many ways, or in many instances, I think it's kind of like redundant, because like film itself is gratuitous. We're watching fucking stories to hear about fucking people in danger. Yeah. It's already built in as the exploitation. Like, we want to hear the fucked up shit. We don't want to hear that everyone got along on the crew and it went swimmingly and nothing happened. That's not what stories are about. Things that happen. Yeah. And typically that means, as in life, things that go unexpectedly and wrong. And that's the story. Yeah. And so, like, there are moments when we're, if it's within certain company, it's like, well, when people are talking about their parents, they're saying, well, my parents had 5 kids. They don't say, my parents fucked like 4 times a week, and my mom ended up pregnant 5 times. Yeah. 7 times actually, but 2 were, one was an abortion, and the other, we don't go into that when it comes to our parents. But if it's somebody else's parents, check this out. Oh, fucking Aunt Sally, she's a fucking slut. Whatever, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's storytelling. So I'm not saying that, again, I wasn't like whipping myself either for pleasure or pain in this fucking instance. I was just very much aware and kind of asking the question as I was fucking like doing it, because that's consciousness, and I like to be aware of these things as I interact with a film, versus just fucking letting it pass. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you said, the stuff coming out of Ian Holm's mouth is it's like basically what for him is blood, but it looks like milk, but it could be cum.
Yeah.
But obviously we know it's not cum, but it can represent cum.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they could have
so
made that shit look a lot different. They could have went with a lot of different things.
They could have made it blue.
Yeah.
Um,
That shit looks like
you
it
know what I
looks
mean?
for a
Like,
reason.
right.
Yeah.
And the reason might be fucking like completely 100% on purpose, or it could also be to a certain extent like, oh shit, like the one we chose looks like fucking milk, or it looks like cum.
Yeah.
It's all mixed up. But the fact of the matter is, obviously she's at her most vulnerable at that point. Taking off your clothes, she's just there, relaxed. But she also is in that vulnerability. It's like typical. The only next thing that would have made her more vulnerable is if she would have started to bathe.
Yeah.
Because typically, like, that's what you see in art history, in films. You see the woman bathing, and then the viewer is at that point the voyeur, right? Or even mythologically, it's the person who's enamored with these fairies or whoever they are who are bathing. That's when the person falls in love with them, even though there's a component of lust. Sometimes it's a component of like, oh my god, like it's the fucking, what's her name in the red bathing suit coming out of the pool in that fucking 80s movie.
Phoebe
Ferris
Cates.
Bueller.
No, Phoebe Cates in Fast Times.
In Fast Times at Ridgemont High, yeah. It's similar, but now add the element of like, now Phoebe Cates is in danger. So there's another fucking element that like makes us even more like, not only are we watching and our eyes are like dilating because we're attracted to what we see, but now our eyes are dilating because we want to fucking take in all this information, because it's like, you know, we don't know it yet, but a few minutes later, that fucking shiny curved thing is actually the alien's head, and it's gonna fucking move, and you're gonna go, oh, fuck.
Yeah, we're not out of this
and
yet.
Even then, and even then, what's the fucking like the term that we use when we're scared? As I just did, we say, oh, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's weird, this weird sex and death kind of thing, and it keys into it beautifully.
I think so. Absolutely. I mean,
and we're rooting for her, and then that's another thing too. Is like when she fucking becomes like the bad bitch, that's when we're fucking like rooting for her on another level. Earlier we were rooting for her like, yes, you're fucking, of course, you're the one that fucking knows, like, yes, do not let them in, fuck that, don't let them in, you're right. But now we want her to survive, but we also want her to not just survive, we want her to kick ass. And we're going to see more of that in the subsequent films.
Yeah. The journey is, it's weird because this film could have been a standalone film. It was a standalone film. There was no intention of where else this story was going to go, or these characters, or no, this was done. But at least for one more film, my God, she becomes something that had never really been seen before that. And I'm really glad it was Sigourney Weaver, because I think, it was between her, Veronica Cartwright, and Meryl Streep, probably Meryl Streep, but Sigourney Weaver, I don't know, man. I'm sure Meryl Streep could have done it. Meryl Streep can do damn near anything, but we've had that. Yeah. We've had the Meryl Streep discussion,
and we will continue to.
And we will continue. Yeah, exactly. But there's something about Sigourney Weaver that this film made her, and the character itself has defined her over so many years. I mean, she's played Ripley 4 times now. She wanted to do it one more time. I mean, that whole thing fell through, but whatever the last two films were, she was never bad. She's always
No.
been,
Yeah.
and that's the one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing in the fourth film and discussing is her performance, because she has always been great in these films. And I don't think she's ever slipped. I don't think she's ever dropped the ball in who the character is or what you can realistically imagine the character would do. She's incredible. And, the world that Ridley Scott created is unlike anything that has ever been on film, and it changed the way we looked at these types of movies. I mean, everything cribs from this and Blade Runner. Science fiction as it is today is a hell of a lot more in keeping with this than in anything else, I think. Or at least the shit that works comes out of Aliens and Blade Runner. Comes out of Alien and Blade Runner. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, what a fucking legacy, right?
Yeah. Unbelievable. All right. Next week we are back with James Cameron's 1986 sequel, Aliens. This time it's war. So is there anything that you want to leave the fine people with, Mr. Chavez?
I want to thank everybody who's contributed to this project of ours, this thing of ours, La Cosa Nostra, and those who will continue to support us, and we'll jump into the pot. Buymeacoffee.com/watch RickRamos. That's buymeacoffee.com/watch RickRamos. It's $5 if you like what we do. If you think you get value out of it, you want to hear us argue, you want to hear us agree, whatever. Throw in. It's appreciated. Jorge Saucedo, you kick off the year
in a big fucking way.
This
Thank you.
In a big way. You've been doing this. Those of you who are contributing, we're going to keep calling you out.
Mm-hmm.
You know who you are. Buy us a coffee. Buy yourself a coffee. Tell a friend. Tune in and watch this.
Thank you very much, folks.